Hey guys, it's Rage. So today I'm going to talk to you about PvE players and New World. We all know that PvP is heavily tied into New World. You really can't get away from it. As soon as you open your map, you are bombarded with 3 different colors, factions, and PvP territory. But what about the PvE content? What PvE content is there to enjoy in New World? So there's actually quite a lot, to be honest, ranging from leveling a fresh character to delving into your crafting professions. But I don't think a lot of people know about the scope of PvE content. So this is what I'm going to tell you. PvE content in New World ranges from doing dungeons, open world dungeons, mini games, to self-development with your character through crafting and through leveling and through side quests. But let's begin with just outlining probably one of the hybrids of the two, the PvPvE style game. So that's Outpost Rush. Outpost Rush is essentially a team versus team environment on an island where 2 teams will be basically fighting to get the most points at the end of the game. And it does have a PvP element, but you can try and avoid that as much as possible and focus solely on the PvE element. There's a boss within the island that if you kill, freezes the opposition's score so that you can get ahead of them. If you've ever played OSRS back in 2006-ish, before they split it to RuneScape 3, there is a very similar minigame called Stealing Creation, where 2 teams will battle it out in a minigame. They'll have to collect clay and then bring that clay back to their base and then craft like weapons and fortified bases so that they couldn't come across and kill you, basically. It's the exact same concept. So go out, get materials, bring it back, fortify your base, get weapons, get the most points, so on and so forth. So that is probably one of the only hybrid mini games within New World. From there on out, it's just PvE. So the next one we have is Invasion. So Invasion is very similar to the 50v50 PvP war that you see, except it's you against the corruption. The corruption is an ongoing enemy within New World, and an invasion is basically you stopping them from taking over your territory. The governor of that specific territory gets to pick who goes against the corruption and gets involved in the invasion, but it is essentially the answer to the PvP war, but for PvE. We also have expeditions, which is basically dungeons. There's 6 of those at the moment. And we also have open world dungeons. Now, open world dungeons is a little bit more difficult to pin down in New World because they're not specifically like a thing. They're not an official thing. But open world dungeons are essentially very similar to dungeons, but you don't have to queue up in a party of 5 in order to enter them. They're open world, so you can go and kill all the mini bosses and the mobs, and then go and kill the elite boss right at the end with any amount of players that you wish. And it's very interesting because it's a palette cleanser. You don't have to force queue a 5-man party in order to progress in this dungeon. You can go when you want. You can grind it how many times you want. It's a good source of experience, and it's a good source of crafting materials and mats as well. And also, it's just a fun time with some friends. Bring some buddies, go to Dead Man's Cove, go to Brightwood Isle. But the only thing is that there's not, like I said, an official term for open world dungeons in New World. And I feel like they could do a better job at pinpointing what open world dungeons are available. They are on the map, but they're kind of scrambled in with POI, so other points of interest, and there's not really a way for you to be able to filter specifically on open world dungeons. So I feel like they could probably do a bad job of that just for the PvEers around here, because, we want to see open world dungeons. Anyway, I digress. Open world dungeons and expeditions, both dungeons that you can do. Then we move away from team content and more to solo progression. And one of the big things that drew a lot of PvE players to New World is the housing element. So essentially kind of like a copy and paste of Elder Scrolls Online. If you've ever played that, you purchase a house in a specific territory, but you need to make sure you have enough reputation with that area in order to purchase a really good house. And then from then on out, the creativity is yours. You can design the house and furniture it however you want. I believe that there may be a way for you to purchase furniture from the auction house, but don't quote me on that. My brain is kind of just saying that that's an obvious thing to do. The other side, the solo progression side of it, is that you actually craft your own furniture. You grind your professions up and you're able to craft your own furniture for your house. So you have solo development there, which I think is really, really interesting. Then obviously you have MSQ, which is the main story quest. So you level from that from 1 to 60, you go through that, you learn about the New World, you learn about the main quest line that's embedded into New World, and alongside that, have side questing. So that's, additional quests that comes from the NPCs, and these are really fruitful. There is so many side quests for you to get involved in, NPCs to meet, stories to learn, and obviously the ongoing parchment with stories on them that you collect as and when you go along the world in New World. You can piece together these individual pages to create a big story. So there's that element as well if you're really into story. Keeping on the same theme as questing, you also have town project questing. These are directly tied to the progression of your town. So if your governor is trying to upgrade a certain crafting bench to a certain level, you can contribute to that by doing town project questing. Similar to that, you also have faction questing, but unlike actually progressing certain crafting areas within the town, you're actually contributing to keeping a hold of that territory for your faction. So without actually being involved in PvP directly, you can help your faction keep control of the territory, which I think is actually quite cool. Finally, last but not least, you have crafting and professions. The really good thing about professions that I think New World does exceptionally well is that it actually engages you to create mini goals and set yourself like mini milestones to achieve. So instead of going out of your way to buy a certain town project item from the auction house, you will use your professions to get that quest item. It's not something that forces you to do it, but you actively set these milestones to get, and when you reach them, they feel so much more rewarding. It's really difficult to kind of explain into words how gripping and addictive profession grinding is in New World, but I think they've honed in really, really well in trying to grip that certain kind of player that likes to grind out certain professions. They've done something really good there. You may have noticed one thing while I was going through all of those lists. I could not mention PvP while explaining to you these different PvE elements. And that is something that I think will break this game if you're not into it. The one thing that a lot of players will be put off by is the PvP aspect, because it is so deeply rooted into this game, you physically cannot get away from it. Okay, and if you're not a fan of PvP or other players affecting your game, then this will definitely be a deal breaker for you. So the way in which that PvP is influenced in your content in New World is many different ways. And let's begin by explaining the most obvious one, which I mentioned at the start of the video, which was faction controlled areas. If you open your mini-map anywhere within New World, you will see 3 different colors on your map, and they will be, one color will dominate the map and others probably not so much. And these are your factions. Now, these are faction-controlled areas, and these affect you in many different ways, even if you're not involved in New World. So the first one, which is the most obvious one, is taxes. So as soon as you even enter like a territory area or a town, it will tell you what the trading taxes are. It will tell you the housing taxes. It will tell you the refining taxes, and it will tell you the crafting taxes. These taxes are set by the governor of the territory. So the company or the guild who takes over that area, they get to decide what taxes you pay. So right off the bat, other players' decisions is affecting you. Now, the good thing about faction controlled areas is if you're within an area that your faction controls, these penalties are reduced significantly. And, oppositionally, if you're not in an area that your faction controls, then these taxes get increased and these penalizing attributes get increased. So the tax limits are set by the company who controls the territory. You also have different crafting focuses in different areas, and this changes all the time. So a specific town could have a crafting bench for cooking that's, tier 4, which means that you can craft tier 4 level items for cooking in that specific area. But if that area gets taken over by another faction, another company, and that governor decides, no, I want armor as the tier 4 crafting bench, you have to say goodbye to that tier 4 cooking bench and then go find another tier 4 cooking bench somewhere within New World. One thing to keep in mind that can be make or break with the game if you like to do solo content. Yeah, different crafting focuses in different areas and it changes all the time. Access to your bank is also limited if your faction doesn't own it. And what I mean by that is that if you're in an area that your faction owns and you're trying to access the bank account of another area that your faction owns, perfect, that'd be fine. But if you're trying to access a bank account of another area that your faction doesn't own, you can't. You have to go over there, grab what you need, and go back. So similar how in WoW that you can access a bank account anywhere within World of Warcraft, even mobile, and it will be the same bank account. In New World, it's split according to what areas. So like the stuff that you put within a certain territory's bank will stay there, you know? And you can only access those if your faction shares the same territory gain. Essentially, access to your bank is limited if your faction doesn't own it. Fast travel also comes into play, so you either get cheaper or more expensive fast travel depending on whether or not your faction controls the area. You will get reduced fast travel weight costs. So depending on how heavy you are or how encumbered you are, it will actually charge you more the more weight you have. So if your faction controls this area, it'll be reduced to 1 Azoth per 10 weight for your controlling faction. Similarly, fast travel distances jumps to 1 Azoth per 100 meters for that controlling faction, and your base Azoth for the cost of fast travel is 50% for controlling factions. So if your faction controls the area that you're fast traveling to and from, you don't have to pay a lot for fast traveling. And you notice this later on in the game because if you're in a specific area and you need to fast travel very far and your faction doesn't own it, it gets hit a lot. Like, it hurts. It really does hurt, especially when you don't have a lot of Azoth, which is the currency to fast travel. It's not good, man. It's not good. It hurts. It hurts a lot. If your faction also controls the area, you get increased volume of items gained when gathering by 10%. You get increased coin, experience, territory standing, and faction token rewards for faction missions and corrupted breaches by 5%. And lastly, you get increased coin and experience rewards from expeditions or dungeons by 5%. So as you can tell, PvP content is so heavily embedded into New World. Even the PVE content that's specifically meant to be just player versus environment is affected by PvP, and the solo adventuring in New World that you think wouldn't attribute to PvP whatsoever is still influenced by PvP in such a heavy way. And if your faction doesn't own the specific area, you get penalized heavily. Fortunately, these things do change quite often, so it's not a if your faction is losing now it's gonna lose indefinitely. Things do change. But it is entirely possible to not contribute to PvP whatsoever. You don't have to contribute to the PvP community, and you can just outright ignore it, which is what I do. I may have explained it in a way that makes you think, oh, it's all doom and gloom. If you really hate PvP, you're gonna really hate New World, and that is definitely not the case. These elements will probably not even affect you in ways that you realize at first, and it's not until you learn the game more and more that you actually realize that PvP does affect the game. Or if you watch videos like this, you realize that PvP does affect the game even if you're not actively contributing to it. But in a sense, I think this is quite interesting because the whole world moves without you. You know, which is a change from other MMOs which solely focus it on you. You are the legend, you are the champion. It's more so that you are a guest within this world of thousands of other players, and the actions of individual players actually contribute to the overall world. And they've created this dynamic that's so immersive. You can get involved in PvP without actually getting involved in PvP. You know, I just think it's quite cool. Question time. So I asked you guys on Twitter if you had any questions or concerns or needed any advice about New World, and I picked a couple to answer right now. So my first one is from Josh Simone91. They said, do you think the game has longevity? Is there a content roadmap for the future? Very, very good question. So from what I can see, the developers are really involved in the game. Back when the beta was around from the very beginning, they were actively listening to the player base and implementing changes that they suggested. But I don't think they've actually released a content plan for the future, not at least from what I could find anyway. There are rumors. There's rumors that they've planned an additional 3 dungeons on top of the 6 that we already have. However, no rumors about raids yet, unfortunately. Kind of gutted about that, and I know some of you will be as well, but definitely room for more dungeons. We've heard about it. We don't have solid evidence, but we know it's coming. So there's definitely more content coming, but we just don't have any specifics yet, and there's no content plan that we're aware of, at least from what I could find anyway. And then Gorain said, are there any worries that once the servers settle, there will be 2 big factions and one that no one wants to touch? I understand that there's a logged in player per faction limit, but surely not all servers will be maxed when things settle. I actually didn't know about the logged in player per faction limit, and I actually started watching more videos about the PvP worry when it comes to New World, about how the factions are going to imbalance massively, and there are some concerns from quite a lot of people. So this is a very good question. This could be a huge issue, but I think there's a couple of things already in place that the developers are trying to like grapple things back before they start going way out of hand. One of those things is to stop one faction dominating over the other. They're disallowing any players to actually sign up to the winning faction. And I also believe that they're looking into another way to give incentives to be on a losing faction. So not in a way that you want to be a faction that's losing, because then that will be demoralizing and you won't have any motivation to win the territories. But in a sense of, if your faction is losing for that tiny period of gameplay time, then it's not all bad, you know. It's not a huge demoralization, and you're not losing out on too much. So they're trying to create some slight incentives, but we don't actually have any evidence of that yet. We've heard things that they're developing that. Like, I heard that. My friend, when I asked them, they heard that. But when I was trying to research this to find a snippet to show you, I couldn't find anything. So I don't know if I've heard it on a YouTube video or a live stream, but I've heard that they're working on something. It's really difficult to regulate. And this is something that I had a personal worry about. When I first started playing New World, I noticed that wars were really constant. Something that I think is detrimental to the game, because too many wars will lose their significance. You know, wars are meant to be this giant thing. It's 50v50 players, you know, they're dominating over a certain territory, but if it happens too much, you kind of just don't care anymore. You know, I'm about my world, I'm picking my flowers, I'm picking my herbs, I'm picking my hemps, I'm doing a little bit of fishing, and I can see so many wars that are like due to start when I open my map, and I'm like, because it was the same a couple of days ago, it will be the same in a few days. And I just feel like it's really losing meaning to me as a player because they happen so frequently. But they did add something in the recent patch, and in this update, they actually added something that would adjust the rate of influence gain for an attacking faction. So it will continue to require a significant amount of effort to flip a territory into a conflict of state. And similarly, they also removed the decrease in influence over time for defending factions. Tiny changes, but I mean, time will tell to see whether or not they actually contribute to anything, but fingers crossed they will. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you feel like I missed something of huge significance for PvE players that you think would be make or break, then do let me know in the comments below, and let me know your thoughts about how the PvP content kind of entwines with the PvE content. I think it's very interesting, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you want to watch me play some New World, maybe you need some tips and tricks, or maybe you just need a company to join. And I live stream New World every Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday at twitch.tv/RageDarling, 12 until 4, so I can start your week off great and send you off for the weekend. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!